Pleasant good morning, Virgin Islands. The Committee of Budget, Appropriations and Finance is hereby called to order. I want to say good morning to the all present, listening and viewing. Today, the committee welcomes the Judiciary and the University of the Virgin Islands to defend their budget. As a self-funded entity, the Research and Technology Park will give a perspective on their financial operations, program goals, challenges, and accomplishments. All of these budget presentation and the post-audit analysis can be found on the legislative website at www.legvi.org. In addition to viewing these budget hearings, I strongly encourage the public to read the presentation to glean the details not included in the narrative. Since the start of these budget hearings last month, I have repeatedly stressed that we are in a challenging federal environment. Yesterday, my colleagues and I met with the Congresswoman Plaskett to discuss the local impacts of the big, beautiful bill. We are still analyzing the direct and indirect effects of this bill on our community and our economy, and I expect that we will be doing so for some time. At this time, I'd like to remind individuals here that have their cell phone to please turn them off or turn them on mute, not to interrupt today's proceedings, and to ask the Madam Clerk to please call the roll.
Senator Marvin A. Blyden. Senator Blyden, present. Senator Dwayne M. DeGraff. Senator DeGraff, present. Senator Ray Fonseca. Senator Fonseca, absent. Senator Novell E. Francis, Jr. Senator Francis, Jr., present. Senator Hubert L. Frederick. Senator Frederick, present. Senator Maurice C. James. Senator James, present. Senator Kurt A. Vele. Senator Vele, absent. Mr. Chair, 5 present, 2 absent.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, any correspondence to be read into the record?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed.
Letter dated July 16, 2025. The Honorable Novell E. Francis, Jr., Chairman, Committee on Budget, Appropriation and Finance, Legislature of the Virgin Islands, Trio 2, 2 Estate, Golding Rock, Christiansted, VI 00820. Dear Chairman Francis, please accept my apologies for being absent from today's meeting for the Committee on Budget, Appropriation and Finance, scheduled for Thursday, July 17, 2025. I have a previous scheduled engagement to attend. Thank you for your appreciation. Cordially, Senator Ray Fonseca, 36th Legislature of the Virgin Islands. This concludes the reading of today's correspondence, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Please mark Senator Fonseca as excused, and we'll recognize Senator Vielle, who's on his way in, and we'll recognize him as soon as he gets here. Let's also recognize the presence of non-committee members, Senator Avery Lewis, our secretary, as well as Senator Carla J. Joseph. They're becoming regulars, so definitely we want to recognize them. They almost feel like part of the Committee of Finance all the time. Yes. At this time, Madam Clerk, please read today's agenda into the record.
The Committee on Budget, Appropriation and Finance will meet on Thursday, July 17, 2025, 10 a.m. in the Earle B. Ottley Legislative Hall on St. Thomas to receive testimony on the fiscal year 2026 budget. Block 1, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., Judiciary, invited testifier, Honorable Reese S. Hodge, Chief Justice. Block 2, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., University of the Virgin Islands, UVI Tech Park. Invited testifiers, Safia George, President, Eric Sonia, Executive Director. This concludes the reading of today's agenda, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We do have the Judiciary branch seated at the testifiers table. At this time, we'll go to the Chief Justice, Reese Hodge, for his introduction, as well as the other members of the team.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Reese Hodge, Chief Justice of the Virgin Islands.
Presiding Judge.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Watlington, presiding judge of the Superior Court.
Good morning, everyone. Regina Peterson, Administrator of Courts.
Good morning. Paulette Rapsat-Simmons, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, Koya Ottley, Human Resources Director.
Good morning to all, and we also have some of your team members on St. Croix, and we'll recognize them at this time. We'll start off with the associate. Oh,
Morning, everyone.
okay.
Alfonso Andrews, Administrative Judge.
Good morning, everyone. Tamara Charles, Clerk of the Superior Court.
Good morning, H. Hannibal O'Brien, Chief Conflict Counsel.
Good morning, everyone. Miguel Tricoci, Assistant Administrator of Courts.
Good morning, everyone. Kimlin K. Etienne, Comptroller.
Very well. Welcome to all at this time. Oh, go ahead, Chief Marshal. Sorry about that.
Good morning to all. Lawrence Walcott Jr., Chief Marshal, Office of the Virgin Islands Marshal.
Yes. Is that it on St. Croix? At this time, Chief Justice, you're recognized for your testimony.
Good morning again. Good morning, Senator Noble E. Francis Jr., Chair, and members of the Committee on Budget, Appropriation and Finance, other members of the 36th Legislature present, members of the Judiciary, staff, and others in the audience. I am Reese S. Hodge, Chief Justice of the Virgin Islands. As head of the judicial branch of the Virgin Islands, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee to present and support the fiscal year 2026 budget request. This presentation covers not only funding for the judicial branch, but includes requests for the Judicial Council of the Virgin Islands and the new Office of Conflict Counsel, OCC. As required by law, I submitted the fiscal year 2026 budget request for the judicial branch and the fiscal year 2024 annual report on the state of the Virgin Islands judiciary and court system by the May 30th statutory deadline directly to the legislature with a copy to the governor. Accordingly, today is the judiciary's principal opportunity to present and defend its budget requests, to the body responsible for ensuring that the needs of the judicial branch are adequately funded, the Virgin Islands Legislature. In support of today's presentation, I'm privileged to have present with me the Honorable Deborah S. Watlington, presiding judge of the Superior Court, the Honorable Alfonso G. Andrews Jr., the administrative judge of the Superior Court, will be appearing from St. Croix, Regina Peterson, the administrator of courts, Paulette Rapsat-Simmons, chief financial officer, Koya Ottley, human resource director, and John Thompson, chief information technology officer. Appearing in St. Croix will be Miguel Tricoci, the assistant administrator of courts, Lawrence Walcott Jr., chief marshal, Tamara Charles, clerk of the Superior Court, Kimlin Etienne, comptroller, H. Hannibal O'Brien, chief conflict counsel, is also available to answer any questions regarding the Office of Conflict Counsel. In this year's State of the Judiciary report, I described the state of the judiciary as responsive to the broad needs of the public, as well as those of the many partners in the justice system, such as law enforcement, the Department of Justice, the Office of a Territorial Public Defender, the Office of Conflict Counsel, and the Virgin Islands Bar Association. Since 2022, the judiciary has employed an all-hands-on-deck approach as it remains committed to address delays in court process and reducing pending caseloads, which involves the active participation of these justice partners. The Supreme Court has documented the judicial branch's accomplishments in the Fiscal Year 2024 Annual Report on the state of the Virgin Islands Judiciary and Court System. A copy of that published report has been provided to all senators, along with our Fiscal Year 2026 budget request, and is also available on the court's website at www.vicourts.org. Accordingly, during the course of this testimony, I will not belabor this committee with the details of our operations over the past fiscal year contained in the annual report, but will only summarize performance trends and core areas. The Judiciary's Fiscal Year 2024 Annual Report documents the progress made regarding pending caseloads before the trial and appellate courts, as well as other areas of court operation. In Fiscal Year 2024, the Superior Court had a total of 11,202 cases filed and disposed of 10,923 cases for a 92% case clearance rate for all cases. However, the various individual court divisions had impressive clearance rates in Fiscal Year 2024. Excluding applications for marriage licenses and traffic matters, the Superior Court resolved 3,033 cases while receiving 2,850 new cases in Fiscal Year 2024 for a clearance rate of 106%. For Fiscal Year 2024, the Superior Court achieved an overall 6% reduction in civil matters, a 20% overall reduction in pending criminal matters, with a 21% reduction in pending criminal jury cases, a number which was just 12% last year. Fiscal Year 2024 statistics also demonstrate a 12% reduction in the number of pending probate matters, with an all-time high of 134% case clearance rate in Fiscal Year 2024. This positive trend continues in the Superior Court, and performance in the Superior Court continues into Fiscal Year 2025. As of June 30th, 2025, there were 504 new filings across all civil case types and 907 matters disposed of, resulting in a 7% reduction in the pending civil caseload. 399 new criminal cases were filed and 627 cases were disposed, for a 13% reduction in the pending criminal caseload when compared to Fiscal Year 2024. Regarding jury cases, the reduction is 21% through the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. I am equally pleased to report that while 293 new probate cases were filed in the current fiscal year, 394 probate matters have been disposed of as of June 30th, 2025, for a caseload reduction of 12% when compared to the probate cases at the close of Fiscal Year 2024. These dispositions and case filings can be seen in the accompanying graph. In Fiscal Year 2024, 43 new appeals were filed in the Superior Court, 31 civil and 12 criminal, and 36 appeals were disposed of, 28 civil and 8 criminal, for an overall clearance rate of 84%. Through June 30th, 23 new appeals have been filed, 18 civil and 5 criminal, and 34 appeals have been disposed of, 27 civil and 7 criminal, for a 13% reduction in the number of civil appeals pending and a 14% reduction in the number of criminal appeals pending. Regarding matters proceeding under the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction, 22 matters have been filed and 38 have been disposed of for a clearance rate of 173%. The Office of Bar Admissions has processed 133 new applications for admission and completed 146 bar admission application cases for a reduction of 13% in the applications pending admission. Additionally, with regard to disciplinary matters, a total of 50 new grievances were filed, 46 complaints against attorneys, 3 complaints against judicial officers, and 1 case of unauthorized practice of law. As of June 30th, 66 cases have been closed, 59 attorney misconduct complaints, 5 judicial misconduct complaints, and 2 matters alleging the unauthorized practice of law. Thus far in fiscal year 2025, the Office of Disciplinary Counsel has achieved a caseload reduction of 8%. Judicial branch funding principles. Starting in the late 1960s to mid-1970s, most states amended their state constitutions to provide that the state court's budget should be submitted directly to the legislature without having to go through the governor's executive budget process. In fact, some states specifically provide that the governor may not reduce the request of the judiciary. Even 50 years ago, the Virgin Islands understood that the separation and independence of the judiciary also depended on how it was funded, and in 1976 required that the judicial branch submit its budget requests directly to the legislature on May 30th of each year. The legislature reaffirmed this requirement in 2016 in Act 7888 when it specified the duties of the administrator of courts to assist the Chief Justice in creating a single annual budget request for the judicial branch, submitted, quote, to the President of the Legislature with a copy to the Governor on or before May 30th of each year, unquote. Additionally, and encapsulating this standard, Principle 18 of the Principles for Judicial Administration, developed and published by the National Center for State Courts, NCSC, in 2012, provides, quote, judicial branch budget requests should be considered by legislative bodies as submitted by the judicial branch. Despite these well-established national principles and the requirements of local law, the executive branch annually imposes a budget ceiling amount for the judiciary as though it were just another executive agency of the government, as opposed to a separate co-equal branch of government. In the executive budget process, this ceiling is imposed with the strict instruction that the fixed ceiling is not to be exceeded without the governor's approval. And that ceiling amount is presented in the executive budget as the governor's recommended funding recommendation for the judicial branch. In general, over the past 9 years, appropriations to the judicial branch have more closely aligned with the executive branch ceiling recommendations for funding of the judicial branch, rather than the budget requests submitted directly to the legislature, including 5 years at the exact same ceiling, while every other agency's budget increased annually. While the legislature offered slight increases above the governor's ceiling in fiscal years 2022, 2023, and 2024, it once again adopted the governor's exact recommended ceiling for fiscal year 2025, resulting in a 3.3% reduction in funding when compared to fiscal year 2024 appropriation, and at a time when critical infrastructure projects needed to be funded. The table of the funding, the executive recommendation, the judiciary's request, and the legislative appropriations are shown in the graph, in the accompanying graph. I have taken the time to spell out this budget process to once again request that the legislature give full and complete consideration to the judicial branch's budget based on the needs set forth in its budget request without the limiting effect of the arbitrary budget ceiling recommendation of the governor in the executive branch budget submission. We have been asked in the past by senators if we have discussed our budget submission with the executive branch. Although we have done so in the past without much success, the solution isn't negotiating a higher recommendation with the executive branch, but the judiciary instead working directly with the legislative branch in a more comprehensive manner than at a single budget hearing, so that the legislature, as the funding authority, truly understands the needs of the judiciary and gives due consideration to the judicial branch's request as required by law. Fiscal year judicial branch operating budget request. The judiciary's annual budget request is derived from a deliberative process which includes the administrator of courts, the chief financial officer, the comptroller, both clerks of courts, and other senior judicial staff, and culminates in the presentation to and approval of the proposed budget request by the Judicial Management Advisory Council, JMAC. The goal of this deliberative process is to identify the funding needed for the judicial branch to discharge its constitutional and statutory duties to the people of the Virgin Islands and to determine what the branch can feasibly accomplish in capital and other projects during the upcoming fiscal year. For fiscal year 2026, the judicial branch requests an operating budget of $53,096,326. The submission also includes a separate request of $145,342 for the Judicial Council, the entity which partially funds the staffing for the 2 district court law librarians, and a separate request of $1,105,131 to fully fund the operations of the Office of Conflict Counsel through fiscal year 2026. The judiciary's fiscal year 2026 operating budget request includes $24,864,744 for salaries and $11,280,309 for fringe benefits, $5,969,359 for other services and charges, $6,568,941 in projected capital expenditures, $1,964,416 for utilities, $1,038,500 for other personnel services, and $700,000 for supplies, which are described in detail in the accompanying graph. Personnel services. For the projected personnel expenses, the judicial branch request of $36,145,053, which includes the 4% compensation scale adjustment requested in fiscal year 2025, totaling $922,982, but not funded, and 55 positions identified as critical vacancies to be filled in fiscal year 2026 at a prorated cost of $2,769,882 with fringe. However, it is important to note that the full impact of carrying these positions, once filled by fiscal year 2027, would be $5.5 million increase to personnel and fringe. As of June 30th, 2025, there were 308 filled positions, 170 in the St. Thomas and John District and 138 in the St. Croix District. Judiciary continues to experience relatively high employee turnover, with perhaps the growing threat now being the sheer number of employees eligible for retirement and a growing workforce generation where the predicted tenure of the average court employee is only 9 years. By the close of fiscal year 2024, 47 employees had been separated from the judiciary, and 1 judicial branch employee had passed away. Thus far in fiscal year 2025, the judiciary has onboarded 24 new hires, promoted 11 employees, and currently has 25 positions advertised, with 5 conditional offers extended to candidates awaiting the start date of the next police academy. As of July 14th, 35 employees have separated and/or have notified the judiciary of their intent to separate for other advancement opportunities or impending retirement. And those are shown in the accompanying graph. As I testified last year, the judiciary completed a market review study of its compensation and classification system with experts from the National Center for State Courts, which determined that the branch's compensation structure needed a 4% market adjustment. While we included that 4% adjustment in the budget request for fiscal year 2025, to implement the first adjustment in the compensation structure for all non-judicial officer positions, the 3.3% reduction in appropriated funding to the branch made it impossible to do so this year. It is important to note that except for fiscal year 2025, the judiciary has applied much of its moderate funding increases in fiscal years 22, 23, and 24 to non-judicial officer employee salaries increases. Had we not applied the funding towards employee retention, the market disparities would have been even greater for judicial branch compensation. Accordingly, we once again requesting that this body fund the 4% market adjustment for non-judicial employees so that in addition to increasing retention, there is a return on the investment for both our employees' time, level of effort, and cost associated with the study. The employees embraced the compensation study process and actively participated in the review process, and our inability to implement the promised adjustment was both disappointing and a difficult, broken promise to our employees. The judiciary has identified 10 employees earning less than 32, and we will update these numbers. We have 25 employees earning less than $35,000 per annum. The judiciary accounting team also estimated that the GERS increased from January, as has been the norm. Accordingly, our payroll projection also do not account for the GERS increase taking effect from October 1, 2025. It would be necessary to increase our request by an additional $144 to cover the 3% increase for the first quarter of fiscal year 2026 if the GERS increase is implemented. Capital fund project funding. Principle 22 of the Principles for Judicial Administration referred to earlier provides that, quote, responsible funding entities should ensure that courts have facilities that are safe, secure, and accessible, and which are designed, built, and maintained according to adopted courthouse facility guidelines, unquote. As with last year's budget request, the most significant increase in the judiciary's budget request is for capital expenditures. For fiscal year 2025, the judiciary sought $4,450,000 to fund phase 2 of the roof replacement and office expansion project at the R.H. Amphlett Leader Justice Complex. However, the resulting appropriation was a 3.3% reduction in funding. As a result, the judiciary continues to struggle to meet legislative and other mandates at the expense of other funding priorities, including its critical infrastructure projects. For fiscal year 2026, the judiciary is seeking $4,100,000 to fund phase 2 of the roof replacement and the office expansion project at the Leader Justice Complex. $670,000 for air conditioning infrastructure replacement, $672,712 for cybersecurity enhancements, $366,000 for vehicle replacements, $366,622 for machinery and equipment for the Marshal's Office. The funding request also includes upgrading stenographic equipment for court reporting, the replacement of instruments for the Rising Stars Steel Orchestra. The request also includes $293,594 for life cycle replacement of computer equipment and $100,000 for replacement of volumes, subscriptions for various legal resources. Our total capital budget request for fiscal year 2026 is $6,568,941. As background, the R.H. Amphlett Leader Justice Complex roof replacement and office expansion project was originally solicited in 2023 and contracted in 2024 to include roof replacement, enclosure of the second floor courtyard, ballistic-proof entry wall, and interior demolition and the west wing build-out to create more usable office space. This body is reminded that no new Superior Court courthouses have been built or expanded for over 30 years, which means the local judiciary continues to expand to meet the demands and new mandates within existing infrastructure. The original cost of the project is an estimated $8,434,850 phased over several fiscal years, and this is without any adjustment for delays or consideration for the impact of rising costs. The current phase of the roof replacement project, originally estimated at $2.7 million, has been significantly delayed due to the federal consistency determination process. I'm happy to report that the roof replacement at the R.H. Amphlett Leader Courthouse is finally about to commence with a projected notice to proceed start date of July 28th, 2025. The sum of $4.3 million has been encumbered towards this project, and $1.6 million has been expended to date. $4.1 million of the Judiciary's capital budget request is attributed to this project and has a significant impact on the planned consolidation and expansion of certain divisions within the court, including the expansion of the pretrial, probation, and parole services division. The past 5 years has witnessed a remarkable growth in support for reforming our nation's pretrial justice system, the portion of the criminal process that begins when the person's first contact with the justice system. To implement an effective pretrial service office and simultaneously reform and reorganize probation and parole services, the Judiciary created a working group to examine the current organizational structure and make recommendations. Those recommendations include increased staffing and the consolidation of services into one division of pretrial, probation, and parole. In this regard, the current budget request includes 9 additional probation officers, and the current Phase 2 expansion at the RH Amphitheater Complex includes demolition and remodeling of interior office space to better accommodate this expansion along with existing divisions. This has taken on a new urgency as the Federal Office of Probation notified the Office of Probation and Parole and the VI Parole Board that it will no longer be supervising the local convicted prisoners who were sentenced by the District Court of the Virgin Islands and released on parole by the Parole Board. 18 cases have been effectively referred back to the VI Parole Board and will now be monitored and supervised by our local probation and parole office. The Judicial Council. With regard to the budget request for the Judicial Council, since our fiscal year 2023 budget presentation, we have consistently informed this committee of a shortfall in the appropriation to the Judicial Council, which originated from the erroneous application of a 10% reduction in fiscal year 2020. This reduction against an appropriation which covers only the salaries of 2 law librarians resulted in a reduced ceiling or funding base for fiscal year 2021 at $103,285. In fiscal year 2022, the legislature increased the funding by 7% to $110,515, but that increase did not absorb implemented increase in GERS and health insurance. We therefore request that the legislature fund the full requested budget for the Judicial Council in the sum of $145,342. The Office of Conflict Counsel. The Office of Conflict Counsel, OCC, was established in response to repeated frustration of judges over the challenges and repeated case delays due to the lack of volunteer panel attorneys and private attorneys to serve as court-appointed counsel for indigent criminal defendants and parties in juvenile and family cases. Accordingly, in December of 2023, the Supreme Court promulgated amendments to Rule 210, establishing an Office of Conflict Counsel as an independent agency within the judicial branch, operating under the supervision of the Standing Committee on Indigent Appointments and supported administratively by the Judicial Branch Administrative Office. The OCC office was later legislatively established by Act Number 8960. The OCC began operating on June 3, 2024, and as of June 16, 2025, has been appointed counsel in 139 cases, 119 of which involve major criminal felonies, and 24 involving juveniles. The office has closed 59 cases and has an active caseload of 80 cases. OCC is currently staffed by a chief conflict counsel, 2 assistant conflict counsels, 1 in each district, 1 investigator in the St. Thomas St. John district, and 1 administrative staff person in each district. These positions and corresponding offices in each district are currently partially funded through December 31st, 2026 on an ARPA grant. However, the office is not yet fully staffed, and the Judiciary has been absorbing operational costs. To date, the $500,000 appropriation provided by Act Number 8960 has not been released by OMB. Again, the sole purpose of establishing the Office of Conflict Counsel is to meet the government of the Virgin Islands' constitutional obligation to provide effective assistance of counsel to all indigent defendants as required by the Sixth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and the Supreme Court of the United States holding in Gideon versus Wainwright. OCC expenses is described in the accompanying table. The sum of $1,105,131 is requested to fully fund the operations of the Office of Conflict Counsel in fiscal year 2026. $508,898 is requested to fund 2 assistant conflict counsels, 1 additional investigator, and 1 paralegal. $100,000 is requested to cover other personnel services to include witness fees, experts, and other appointed counsel. $152,000 for office and computer equipment and vehicles in each district. $304,233 in other services and charges to fund travel, transportation, training, and the implementation of practice management software and cloud storage. Judges are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the legislature, and every judicial vacancy threatens to delay case processing and result in increased caseloads per judge. Significantly, Superior Court judges serve a 6-year term, and the pertinent provisions of the Virgin Islands Code contemplate that the governor will either reappoint an incumbent judge or select a new judge before the end of an incumbent judge's 6-year term. The terms of 4 Superior Court judicial officers expired in May, with only 1 reappointment and no new nominations to date. Title 4, Section 72A of the Virgin Islands Code provides that a 180-day grace period in which an incumbent judge whose term has expired may continue to hear cases. That period will end in November, or sooner should an incumbent judge decide against serving out their 180-day holdover period. 1 judicial officer thus far has decided against serving until the end of the holdover period. Prior to the passage of Act Number 8919, the presiding judge could recommend the appointment of a senior sitting judge to the Chief Justice on the legal authority which had existed in the judicial branch for nearly 50 years. This was perhaps the most impactful tool at the judiciary's disposal to guarantee seamless continuity of case management during judicial vacancies and emergencies. We strongly encourage the legislature to remedy this ensuing crisis with support of Bill number 36-0101. Before the significant progress that has been made with regard to case management and backlog reduction is undermined. In closing, I reiterate the judicial branch's budget request of $53,000 $93,096,877, which includes funding for the 5th Justice to the Supreme Court. The request of $145,342 to fund the salary adjustments for the law librarians who did not receive increases in fiscal year 2024 due to insufficient funding, and the request of $1,105,131 to fully fund the Office of Conflict Counsel in fiscal year 2026. I request that this committee and the full legislature give all 3 requests your thoughtful consideration. Thank you for the opportunity, for providing us the opportunity to testify in support of our budget requests. And before closing, I take this opportunity to thank all of our dedicated, hardworking, and exceptional employees who continue to meet and exceed the mandates of their jobs in service to the judicial branch and the people of the Virgin Islands. And here I wish to make a correction to our statement. I especially want to recognize our 2 employees of the year. And that Tashima O'Brien, Procurement and Contracting Officer in the District of St. Croix, and Camelia Joseph, Court Improvement Program Coordinator in the District of St. Thomas and St. John. Ms. O'Brien has dedicated 27 years of her continuous service to the judiciary. She exhibited remarkable level of professionalism by providing assistance to others in a wide range of circumstances. Whether faced with a challenging situation or routine task, she remains dedicated to supporting her colleagues and ensuring a positive work environment and vendor relations. Her willingness to lend a helping hand, regardless of demands or pressures she encounters, reflects on her strong commitment to teamwork and excellence. Ms. Camelia Joseph's 19 years at the judiciary, professionalism, customer focus, character, and integrity have culminated in this prestigious recognition. Ms. Joseph has challenged herself, and in various positions she has held, by taking advantage of the internal opportunities to grow and contributing her unique talent. So we wish to congratulate those 2 employees of the year. I, as well as members of our administrative team and the Chief Conflict Counsel, remain available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice Research, and good morning again to your team there with you and all of the other honorable judges on the panel, and also I wanted to say good morning to all the other testifiers. Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to the people of the Virgin Islands. Good morning to staff, central staff. The lineup for my colleagues are going to be first Senator DeGraff, Senator Maurice James, Senator Frederick, Senator Carla Joseph, Senator Avery Lewis, Senator Johnson, and Senator Fiele. But before I go there, Chief Justice, your ask for this budget cycle is $53,096,326.
Yes.
And you're stating that you needed how much more to help run your operations effective and efficiently? How much more? What's your ask? How much more are you asking for based on your testimony?
We're not asking for any more other than the Judicial Council and for the Office of Conflict Counsel.
Which is how much?
Well, as I indicated, Conflict Counsel, which is the most significant amount is $1,105,131.
Okay. And very well. And in federal grants, you are slated to receive about $8.3 million in